So good morning, everybody. COO reached out and said, please give a talk in the morning. It's going to be bright and early. People are getting breakfast, so keep the topic nice and light. So I was like, how about some math? And that's kind of where we started, and that's kind of where we kicked all this off. So we're going to talk a little bit about who I am, the company, why we did this, what we did, data and techniques, results and findings, and kind of the, we won't do any Q&A, but if you want to chat with me later, feel free to connect and we'll go through it. Okay, so I am Mike Lanciano. I am the Director of Engineering Growth at Clarity. Because there are 1.5 million Mikes in the world, I get a fun bunch of nicknames. I also go by Mikey Lasagna or Nitro Lasagna, depending on which circle you happen to catch me in. So I am a software engineer turned platform engineer, data science on the weekends. That's what I like to do. Just finishing up my graduate certificate in data science. I've done everything in my career from 5-person startups to 50,000-person companies, Fortune 100, 500, and banking, finance, education, you name it, I've done it. And these are just some fun facts about me. So a little bit about Clarity. We are a digital services firm in the Columbia region, born out of the IC, doing most of the digital transformation and involved with a lot of the efforts such as Kessel Run, the Army Software Factory, Bespin, Platform One, Kobayashi Maru, et cetera. So we help a lot with the digital transformation. And you're probably asking yourself, what is the Director of Engineering Growth? Basically, it's kind of a self-made title to kind of sit at the intersection of the technology, right, and understanding engineers as not just the HR people aspect of it, but the actual engineering struggles that they have, working through them with as kind of their advocate within the company to kind of help grow their careers, where they're going and what they're doing. Okay, so why do we do this, right? Starting with why, right? Are we following our mission? So there's a concept called Ikigai, which you may be familiar with. Sorry if I mispronounced that. I'm sure somebody will call me out on it. But it's the intersection of what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for, right? Your reason and your purpose for existing. So we often question that, right? Making sure, are we aligning to our mission? Are we aligning to our North Stars? Are our outcomes and are the things that we are involved with aligned to this specific mission? And obviously that requires saying no, and it requires you to also be invested in what you're doing and what you're putting out there. Okay, so we want to understand if our forward-facing presidents, our BD and our proposal, actually match all the things that say we are who we say we are, right? A Clarity is what they say they do. They execute on what they do. There's a technical excellence behind everything that they do, right? Because that's what we care about, and that's really where we want to grow and where we want to shine. So we don't want to be the people who sign up for, I can do that because I'm an engineer, and ultimately fail to deliver the outcomes towards the customer, because nobody really likes that, nobody benefits from it, and there's a lot of that, especially in this industry. Okay, so how do we do this? This is where it starts to get a little bit into the math, but I promise you I went super light on the machine learning. If you want to talk to me more about it, I'll geek out all day, so feel free to call me. But we leveraged our proposal data, so we took all of our proposal data, lots and lots of data cleaning. If anybody is a data scientist and they tell you they've never done data cleaning or that they've found some pristine data set, please have them call me because I have a lot of money to send them. I haven't seen one yet. So it was a lot of data cleaning. Word2Vec. So Word2Vec was the main algorithm that we used. If you're not familiar with it, if you've ever been on Facebook and it says hey, finish this post by tapping the center button on your iPhone, that's actually a Word2Vec implementation. It's probably Apple's twist on it. But it's basically word relative, how closely related each word is by the preceding and following words, right? And then the LDA for topic modeling. So LDA, I won't even try and pronounce it because it's got a German word in it, but it's a latent Dirichlet allocation. So I did try. NLTK, normal Python stuff, and Spacey. So these are just the normal machine learning libraries we used for this application. Pretty basic stuff. So why do we use two algorithms, right? So Word2Vec is designed to understand how closely related words are. LDA is designed for topic modeling, right? What type of topic contains a certain amount of words, right? So how closely related is this something that you write to the specific topic? There is actually a person at Stitch Fix, Mr. Moody, who wrote Word2Vec, which is a great algorithm too, if you're super interested in that. And that's a great way to also get into this. And that does a little bit more of what we're doing. So the high-level pipeline. Sorry, I know I'm kind of speeding through this, but I just want to make sure we're being cognizant of time. So we parsed and processed proposal data. We broke everything out into individual components. We used paragraphs as delineating, because when you write proposals, generally speaking, if you're a decent writer, your paragraphs are usually related to a certain topic, right? They're not hopefully you're not covering 18 topics in one paragraph. If you are, I'm sorry for anybody who sat on a proposal committee and had to read that. Terrible, but that's one of those things we make some general assumptions about. And we process out all of the data. So obviously in proposals, we've got legalese, we've got all sorts of stuff in there that doesn't really feed well to a machine learning algorithm. Tons of numbers, by the way. There's a lot of numbers, like bullets and stuff like that, that don't actually make sense relative to the proposal. We tokenize that data, so we pull out all the data that's relevant to us. We tokenize individual words. That's how the Word2Vec algorithm actually pulls it apart. Generate bigrams and trigrams, right? So bigrams and trigrams. There are common phrases that actually are two words, right? So if we tokenize every single individual word, we end up with things that don't make sense, right? So if I tokenize an entire sentence, I can end up with continuous integration as two separate tokens. But in reality, right, I also want those to be one token, because those are a bigram that exists where two words actually have a single meaning. And so we have to generate those capabilities together. Another word that I struggled to pronounce, lemmatization. Basically the easiest way to describe this is we dropped everything that didn't add value to our pipeline. So for instance, if it was a adverb or an adjective that didn't necessarily fit within the bigram trigram model, we dropped it because it didn't add a lot to what we were trying to do with the topic modeling. And then we split it into two training models. So we create the LDA model and the Word2Vec model. And then we visualized the LDA model, which you'll get to see. Okay, so this first fun, cool experiment, right? So we run the first topic generated. We have 7 core values, so we take that as the topic chunking, and we're good enough, right? So if you've ever done machine learning, hyperparameterization and optimizing hyperparameters takes forever. So obviously for this first experiment, we're just let's take a wild guess at some of the things that we think are applicable, right? Methodology is questionable. We can talk about that later if you want to talk to me about that, because definitely some better ways to decide what topic you want, how many chunks and things like that you want. But we did take some stabs at it. So we actually came up with 7 topics based off the findings. So we engineering, solutioning, data, people ops, team, people growth, and project management. Not a bad swing, actually, right? So it aligns to a lot of what we write about, and we found that basically some of these things are definitely core competencies that we have, and definitely understanding that our writing, relatively, has some topics to it that make sense for what we are as a company. So we found keywords in the engineering sections development, user, pipeline, goals, engineering, product, things that were super important. Things that were important to me, people ops, process, talent, recruiting, training, support, culture, actually came under people growth, onboarding growth, and career. So we actually did okay on this, and it's one of those things where it was a really interesting moment, because we just kind of took a step back and kind of looked at it and was that's not terrible. All right, so what does that actually look like, and what does this even mean? It's a bunch of circles, and it is really pretty. So it briefs well on the slides, so that's why it's here. No, I'm kidding. The actual topics are distributed on a graph relative to the capabilities that exist. And what you're actually looking for here is you're looking for how distributed your topics are, because that describes how well you actually broke out your machine learning, your algorithm, your process, and your chunks. So basically, when you see overlap between circles here, what you're actually seeing is the overlapping words. You're seeing words that are common, but exist within kind of 2 spheres. So what you want to do is optimize for pulling the algorithm apart so that your circles are a little bit, they're overlapping, and they're not as closely knit together. Because if you have them closely knit together, you're essentially saying, like, you're writing a lot of the same stuff. And we couldn't decipher the amount of topics that you actually have in your documents. So just doing a quick time check. All right. So you can see here, like, that first bubble is the, like, engineering. That's the engineering topic that we, like, got. So we did okay. Like, so it means, like, generally speaking, with the exception of topics 7 and 6 that you can see at the bottom left-hand quadrant, we are actually kind of keeping with topics that don't necessarily overlap. So we have, like, a decent, like, sparsity in writing of information. They were easily decipherable by the machine learning algorithm. They were able to decide, hey, these things are definitely things that you're writing about, and these are different topics. And we weren't using the same amount of words, which hopefully is great for people who are reading it. But that we actually, like, are deciding what, as we look at this algorithm, that, like, okay, like, these topics are probably a representative of some of our core competencies and kind of what are we doing, and are we doing it correctly, and are we writing about it well? So this is just, again, so it's the same diagram, but it's pulled slightly apart, so you can see the difference between the two topics. And it shows you all the keywords, the relativistics, the probabilities, and all the things that show everything that you're looking for with that specific topic. So it's just a really nice way to visualize all of the actual math that's happening underneath the scenes, to show that all these things are different, and we did okay. Like, not terrible. All right, so the Word2Vec. So Word2Vec is kind of an interesting one, because it doesn't actually visualize very well. But what it does do is it allows you to submit words to the system, and it will return you a list of the words that it thinks it's most closely related to based on your tabbing. So we did agile processes, and Word2Vec requires you to put negative capabilities in there, because it'll, like, basically turn how quickly the word is relativistic to the other words in the sentence. So you want to, like, kind of filter out, like, if you wrote a very common thing and you don't put out the negative parts of it, it will eventually kind of cycle through, so you won't get the right data out of it. So agile in processes, and we negatived we in ability, because it was something that we saw a lot of in our writing. We ended up with securing, practices, velocity, delivery, team. So we were getting a lot of words that we find in our agile documentation, which is perfect. We did Kubernetes for the hot topic in the room. We came back with, we write a lot about Rancher, Terraform, Docker. We talk about EKS, RKE, clusters. So Tanzu, if you're a VMware fan, because they sponsored this, so go Tanzu. All right, so general thoughts on the process. So we think of machine learning as a tool for customers to improve, but it was an interesting point where we were kind of like, we could use this. Like, we could do this ourselves, and we could think about how we should improve and how we should improve our processes and how we should find, like I mentioned earlier, like our Ikigai. Like, are we doing the things we say we do? Are we following our North Star? Are we in organizational alignment? And do we have, like, tactical, applicable data to prove that, right? Like, is it a real thing? Is it tangible? Is it something that's executable? Is it something that if, like, someone was like, how well are you doing? We could be like 90%, right? Because I'm a numbers guy, and that's what I like. But it was just one of those things that it's an interesting data point on that plan of introspection for who you are as an organization, who you are as a company, and who you are as you're growing. So, yeah, the bullet there, like, sums it up. The more you understand about yourselves, the better decisions you make to improve yourself, right? Like, whether you're a person, whether you're an organization, just carte blanche. Methodology isn't perfect. Like I said, there's 1.5 million better ways to decide how many topics you want. There's 1.5 million better ways to implement an algorithm. There's 1.5 million better ways to hypertune parameters. We haven't gotten that far in this capability, because it was just honestly one of these things where it was a small experiment. So we talked about Agile, we talked about Lean. You know, those small experiments, getting those things out and understand, like, is this valuable? Is it valuable? Is it worth pursuing? And, you know, we're going to kind of continue down that methodology. It's an interesting application at scale for organizations of large quantities of proposals, organizations that read a lot of proposals, organizations that write a lot of proposals, organizations that have a lot of different writers and different writing styles, because this now can feed into the fact that we can send these future proposals back into these models and say, okay, like, how are we doing? right? What topics did we cover? Did we cover all the topics we thought we were going to do? Because now this model that's trained can kind of pick up those topics inside the newly written proposals, and that's kind of how we're going to operationalize this, right? So it's one of those things where now we have a real feedback loop, a machine-based feedback loop, where it's like, okay, we feel good about the proposal, we feel good about the values, did we say all the things we wanted to say, did we do all the things we wanted to do, and is it objective? Because everybody writes a proposal and they're like, this is perfect, right? Everyone ships it out the door and they're like, this is my baby. I did great. So it's one of those things of like having that objectivity really kind of helps set the stage. Okay, so yeah, how many people are saying the same things? How often are we saying the same thing? Is it good or bad? Are we saying the right things? Are we saying good things? Are we saying bad things? Right? Are we feeding into bad practice? Right? Like where, hey, everybody's agile, right? So just say the word agile enough, and eventually you'll get there. Like we don't want to be those people. Like we want to be saying the right things about agile, the right things about outcomes, the right things that we want to do as a company, and the right things we want to do organizationally. All right. Still a lot to be desired. A lot of human in the loop. A lot of like the data cleaning process, the data capability, and expanding that definitely was difficult. So we have a lot to do in terms of operationalizing this capability so that we can ship it, which is the whole point of why we're here. All right, so where do we go? I talked a lot about hyperparameter optimization. So what this is basically, if you're not familiar with machine learning, this is you feed a whole bunch of numbers into these machine learning algorithms, and out pops kind of this model. And you gotta kind of test it and test it and test it again, and you tweak some of the numbers. So for instance, like in LDA, like I won't bore you because it's still carb o'clock in the morning, but it's like, LDA has like an alpha and a beta like that you have to feed it relative to the actual algorithm and how it distributes words across a graph and across vectors. So like you want to tune that, right? Like you don't want to just be like default Python library, totally fine, like let's just do that. So we have a lot to do there. And then the operationalizing of the capability. So we've already talked to users, we've already gathered feedback, right? Like the hypothesis we have now as an organization is, hey, we can use machine learning to objectively understand our organization as well as the human elements of our organization and kind of pull these things together to make sure our messaging is like really well and really cohesive. And some of that includes glue between capture and proposal, so making sure we're aligned to the mission. We're a mission-first organization. We care a lot about it. So that's why we say no to a lot of things, right? If it's not mission-first, we're really not super interested. Align and grow resources to meaningful opportunities, making sure that the proposal data that are coming in, the RFPs, the RFIs, all the stuff like that, actually like, does the information we're getting from the outside world reflect what it is as a mission and organization that we want to do, and are we going after it? And then recurring dashboard of information for our forward messaging, right? So real implementation of a real-time organization picture that basically says what it is that we're good at, what our core competencies are, the reason we exist, and all of the business that we go after. Are we doing the right things? Are we growing? When I started the company, we were 30 people. We're now almost 170. So it's been exponential growth, and it's been great. But it's one of those things where, as we grow, right, this will help us kind of keep track of, in an objective fashion, okay, like what's our alignment? What's our North Star? What's our Ikigai? Like why do we exist, and how are we growing in that direction? All right, so I talked really fast, but it's just about there. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you for listening to me drone about mathematics for this morning, although I try to keep it as light as possible. If you need anything, please feel free to reach out. I'll be here. All right, thank you.
That was great. Yeah, that was awesome. Thank you so much. The reason I'm so excited about that is, obviously there's an application for, I'm losing my voice, I'm sorry, an application for defense contractors and their proposals, but I'd really love to see that on the government side as well. And there have been efforts to do that at a large scale. Like, we're going to take all the Air Force contracts and put them through machine learning and figure some things out. I would argue that organizations down at the team level, like a Kessel Run or a VA Lighthouse, we should be doing it at that level, because you're the team, you have a very discrete mission, and you can start looking at are the RFIs and RFPs that you're putting out getting the kinds of proposals that you want, and are you selecting the proposals you want? Being on this side, especially coming from Kessel Run, I'll be honest, I would pat my own back all the time about our agile acquisitions, like innovation and all the crazy things that we were doing with RFIs and RFPs. And being on the other side of it now, seeing both that organization and others, there is a ton of room for improvement still. It's not just like big Air Force and big VA and no, even the innovative organizations are still struggling on RFIs and RFPs, and there's a huge disconnect between what you're asking for and what you're getting. So could be a really cool opportunity if you have some internal funds to be able to stand up a small team to do something like this. I think the results would be really enlightening. So thanks, Mike. I really appreciate it.